He respects Althea. I respect Althea a lot, just because of her power. Aoide is just a friend. I mean, I've known her forever. We disagree on a lot of things, but we're friends. So, that's what friends do. We stick together even though we disagree on a lot of things. And Audrin's a mess. Audrin is a mess in many different ways, maybe more than people realize. He sees that, or I see that Audrin has kind of that faith in him. He has that idea, the ideals. He has the justice and the good can prevail, and that people should be good generally. And when he sees people do things that are not very nice, that are very messed up or evil, he reacts. So it was somewhere in college. So I've always played games and stuff growing up as a kid, but mostly it was like video games and stuff. And I remember playing a few board games maybe with my parents and stuff. But I was never really, not necessarily that I wasn't interesting. I just never had the means to kind of play like board games or like crazy card games or even role playing games. And I had never heard of Dungeons and Dragons until I was like in high school or something. But I still didn't have the means to play it. So, cause I'm from Venezuela. I'm not from the U.S. So when I was back in Venezuela, it's not like you could just go out and fight a game store, and it's just not like a thing, or I guess it's not as common over there. So when I got into the U.S. and I got into college, I heard about Dungeons and Dragons, and I started watching people online playing. Like a lot of people, I got into Critical Role when that started playing, and I was like, you know what, this sounds like fun. I kind of want to give it a try. And that's when 5th edition came out and all that stuff. So I got the books. I got the Dungeon Master. I got all the books at the time. And I was like, I just got to find some people to play. And I asked a few friends around. And they were like, sure, but we've never played before. We just kind of want to try it for a bit and see if we like it. And they were like, do you know how to play? And I'm like, sure, yeah, I know how to play. I'll DM. So my first experience was actually DMing. And I DM'd them. And they all liked it. And it worked out. So we kept playing after that. And then I really liked DMing, and then at one point I looked for people who were DMing so I could play. And then I found game stores and stuff during college where I would play. And that's sort of how I got into it. And then after that, I got into board games and card games and all that stuff. I mean, it's gotten popular recently, which is great. And I think that's just because of exposure. I think why it's so popular, why people like it is, I've heard people before talk about it where it's like, it's almost what you used to do when you were a kid, right? When you were a kid, you would go out and just make shit up. You were just like, I'm this and you're that, and you would buy like toys and stuff, and just pretty much you would role play. It's pretty much what it was, and you're just making stuff up in your head. But obviously, as adults, or even as young adults, I guess, or teenagers, can't really go out and do that, and people are gonna be like, "What are you? That's weird." You're like going around with a plastic sword saying you're some adventure and you're killing imaginary dragons or whatever. But D&D is that. It's like, or any role playing game. It's like you sit down with a few friends or people you've never met before or whatever, with people, and you've all kind of decided that you're just going to make stuff up in your heads and you're just going to have fun with it. And it's just, that's what it is. You're being a kid again. It's pretty much, I think, what it is. In a more controlled environment. Controlled. Depends whether or not Mark is the one DMing. Mark has no control over anything. But why I like it, that I get to flex like the creative muscles, I guess. We talked before this, but I do engineering. I'm a mechanical engineer, which a lot of people would think is a very logical kind of position or career, but it really isn't. I mean, there's a lot of logic behind it, but it's a lot of critical thinking, a lot of problem solving. So it does require some sort of creativity, and D&D and role-playing games is pretty much that made into a game, right? Is you're critically thinking and putting your creativeness to solve problems and have fun and stuff. So I get to kind of flex those muscles, which I do flex in my job, but more so in a game. It's a creative outlet. I found out about Vicious Mockery through Mark. So he goes to a game store here in LA, or in the LA area, called the Game Hub, and it's next to a comic book store called the Comic Bug. And at one point, when I moved to the area, I was like, I need to find people to play D&D with that I'm not DMing. I want to actually play. So I looked up online, and I found that people were meeting at this game store. So I was like, okay, I'll go. It was on Wednesday nights. So I went, and my first day there, Mark's the one that's in charge of that whole thing that he's doing there on Wednesday nights. So I was a new player. He was like, okay, yeah, you can join me with some other new players and stuff. I joined him. I played a game with him for like a few nights. I remember the character I made. It was a rogue, dark elf rogue named Kraloth, who was just true neutral and just didn't give. He just kind of did his own thing. Didn't care about the other players much. And Mark, from what he tells me, this is his story. Mark liked my interaction with one of the NPCs he had. The NPC was this little kobold guy, this little tiny little guy who, like, what was he doing? He had control over, like, a dragon, or he had a pet, like, little tiny dragon. And we were trying to find this tiny dragon. And Kraloth saw him as a tool. He was like, okay, well, this guy knows where he is, and he might be able to control him. So through our whole little adventure in this dungeon, I just kind of like, or Kraloth kept teaching him how to use like his daggers and stuff and trying to help him and protecting him and stuff. And as soon as we met this dragon, this little tiny little dragon, turns out the tiny little dragon hated him completely and he had no control over him. So as soon as that happened, Kraloth just tried to kill the kobold because he was like, well, this guy's useless now. And for some reason, Mark really liked that interaction of like, for the whole time, everyone thought I was being really nice to this little guy, this little kobold, but I wasn't. I was just using him. And as soon as we got there, Kraloth was like, well, this guy's useless. And someone stopped me. Someone stopped Kraloth from killing the kobold. And then he just kind of like, okay, whatever. I don't want to deal with him at all anymore. And I just stopped talking to him altogether. And somehow that impressed Mark of how I interacted with this tiny little NPC that he made. So he asked me like, hey, I'm thinking of starting this show where we're going to film it and put it on YouTube. And you should come like audition or whatever. And I was like, sure, I'll show up. And then I showed up and auditioned. And he liked it, so. The concept of Vicious Mockery is probably a better question for Mark or Jesus, who's the producer. To me, I mean, it's just a bunch of people playing D&D. I guess you could say friends. I mean, I never met Mark until I showed up at that game store, and Andrew was there too, so that's where I met Andrew. Jordan I met as soon as we started playing here, so the first episode that came out, that was the second time I saw Jordan. But I think, I don't know if that's the concept, but I think it shows kind of like the strength of D&D, where it's like, I just had to play one game with these people that I've necessarily not been friends with or didn't know, and immediately we have a connection, right? We have stories. We can, if we met up in a party or something, we'd be talking about like, oh, you remember that one time this happened, and everyone else around us would be like, what are these people talking about? They did what? They killed the dragon, or they did this, someone slipped on something. And that's the cool thing about D&D, is like we just spent 4 hours just being kids, right? Just making stuff up in our own heads and playing with our imaginations. And after those 4 hours, we're better friends. We know each other better. And we have some sort of connection. So D&D is really good at making friendships, I think, and strengthening friendships or ruining them. But if you ruin a friendship through D&D, then you probably shouldn't have been friends to begin with. Probably means someone was taking the game too seriously or something. So the concept, I don't know. Ask Mark or Jesus. It's to have fun, play games, and put it on YouTube, and it's an excuse to play D&D on Sundays. So Delraun. Delraun's backstory is sort of, I kind of went with the regular D&D trope of everyone's an orphan. It's also like the fantasy. I don't know if you've ever seen like fantasy stories and stuff. It's like the hero has no parents, or they died a terrible death, or something like that. So I was just like, no one else did that when we were making characters. So I was like, I'm gonna do it. So he's an orphan. His parents didn't die a terrible death, or maybe they did. I don't know. That depends on Mark. But his backstory is that he was found on the street as a baby. And he was picked up and he was given to an orphanage, which is Dias Light. So if you guys have seen the show, Dias Light Orphanage has shown up a couple times or a few times. It's the orphanage where he grew up. And he was given the name Delraun because the old headmaster at the orphanage had just died when he was found. So they gave him the name as kind of like a tribute or something for the old headmaster. And that's how he got the name Delraun. He has no last name. because he doesn't know what his family is, so he doesn't have a last name. So he's just Delraun, and he grew up in the orphanage. In the story, I think by now you guys have seen that there's a little gnome character called Mythal, who is his little friend. He's like his best friend, who he's a wizard. The backstory with that is that Delraun helped him. Mythal wanted to be a wizard. He wanted to get into the arcane stuff, but the orphanage is a very religious place, and they wanted him to go into cleric or something religious. And if you guys have met Delraun in the show, he doesn't. He's very combative, and he's very he protects people. He thinks everyone should be free to do whatever they want. So he saw that Mythal was getting kind of bullied into this, so he stepped up and kind of in a very violent way, which I'm not gonna talk about necessarily what that violent way was. That will come up in the game at some point, I guess. But in a very violent way, he pretty much just threatened someone and somehow managed to get Mythal to go pursue his arcane stuff. And they didn't force him to do anything else. And then Delraun instead got reprimanded and sent to a monastery to train. Really, they just sent him there because he was a problem. He was too violent. And so in this monastery, this religious monastery, they taught him how to use weapons, kind of how to channel his anger, I guess you would say, anger, violence, or whatever. So he learned how to fight, weapons, patience, and self-control and all that. He didn't do very well with that either. So they kicked him out of there. And when they kicked him out, he was already an adult. So after that, he's just kind of did his own thing. Mercenary work, or when we first met him in the first episode, he was fighting in a bar for money and things like that. So that's his backstory. He's kind of the guy or the kid who kind of had nothing and kind of tried to fight his way into something, which ended up just him getting kicked out of pretty much everything he's been in. But he doesn't really care. He forges his own path, I guess you could say. His agenda, when the game started, his only agenda was money. Not necessarily because he wants to be rich or anything. I think I've already shown several times in the show that he doesn't keep money very long. He spends it. Either he gives it to the orphanage or people who need it, or just to buy things for his friends or for himself. He doesn't keep money, doesn't really care for it other than for usefulness. But he was just interested in making money and just hanging out with his friend Aoide and all that. And then it all became a mess. And then they got involved with some people. And so now his agenda is that he's kind of just in it. But the one thing, Delraun, he's very religious still, from both the monastery and from the orphanage. And he sees that there's corruption within the ranks of paladins and stuff like that. The religious sect or section or whatever, the religious guild of that world. And he takes that very seriously. He does not like heretics or hypocrites or people who use Daya's name wrongfully. So he's out for blood at this point. His agenda is the guy who betrayed them or played them, Creekend. He's gonna die because you don't just trick Delraun like that. And then all these paladins and clerics who are saying they're supporters of Daya and stuff, but they're out here killing innocents and stuff. They're gonna die too, because that's how Delraun sees justice. He's very black and white when it comes to that, which is probably a character flaw, but we'll see how that goes. That's his motive at the moment. He knows Aoide, so the relationship between them is he knows Aoide from just being an orphan and living in that city in Sectus. So they just know each other. I wouldn't say they're like best friends or anything. They're acquaintances and then have become friends over time. He doesn't know anything about Jordan and Audrin until he meets them. And to him, Aoide is still his friend. To some degree, it's like they're friends, but how could I say it? It's not like he doesn't mind fighting with her, I guess you could say. He doesn't mind if something happens and he has to stand up to Aoide, he wouldn't have any problem doing that. But if anything happens to her, he's always down to sacrifice himself or help her in any way, protect her. But he'll do that for most of the party because he recognizes that. Or one of the things he was taught in the monastery was strength in numbers and strength in your friends. You're weaker by yourself and you're stronger with other people, right? So he protects everyone in the party because that's how he sees himself as most useful. Jordan, or Thea, Delraun sees Althea as the strongest party member. She's the Hulk or Thor, wherever that argument goes of who's stronger, Thor or Hulk. But she's the strongest in the party, and he will defend her till his last breath because he knows that if they're in deep trouble and they're fighting something strong, if anyone can take it down, it's her. But her weakness is that if someone comes up to her and hits her, face to face, melee, then she's going down pretty quickly. So he's going to protect her. So that's how he sees her, I guess, in the team as a fighting. Because Delraun has two different ways he sees people: the usefulness and their character. In the party, when they're fighting, there's a specific way that he sees people. He knows that the strong one is Althea, and she's doing all the damage, and she's doing all these crazy spells and stuff. So he'll protect her always. That will be his number one priority. Where he sees Audrin, the guy who's like a meat shield. Well, he's a shield. He's made of metal pretty much at this point. He'll let him kind of do his thing. He doesn't need to go protect him or anything. Unless he gets grappled by things, because he likes hugging things. And the same thing with Aoide, where she's not as strong as Althea, but he'll protect her because he knows she's weak when it comes to hand-to-hand combat. And that's just kind of the training he's gotten from the monastery of trying to play to people's strengths and protect people's weaknesses and stuff like that. Because he knows he's not as strong. He's better at protecting them than anything else. As characters, he's intrigued by Althea. There's stuff about Althea that he doesn't understand, especially the magic. But also, he's just intrigued at how she deals with things and how she knows she's hiding a lot. She doesn't know much about her, and she hasn't said much about herself. So he's more intrigued than anything. So I guess it's sort of like a friendship of like, he's still trying to feel that out as to see what's going on there. Audrin, he trusts a lot, actually. I would say the person he trusts more of the entire party is Audrin, and I feel like it's because Delraun thinks Audrin just wears his heart on his sleeve. Like, he's not hiding much. He's kind of shown what he is, I think. Or at least Delraun thinks. If he hasn't, well, then he's tricked him. But he seems pretty straightforward as to what to expect from him. And they both have the religious aspect to them. They both are very strong followers of Daya, or I guess Delraun more than him. But he can see that Audrin follows at least the aspect of justice and good and things like that, and maybe not necessarily God, but like what she stands for. So he's totally fine with Audrin and would trust him with anything, really. So that's how he sees Audrin, his little religious buddy. And then, Althea. And Aoide is just Aoide. Friend Aoide. As Delraun, I hate the name Pickle Posse. That's Delraun. I think when we came up with the name, I don't know who threw it out. It might have been Mark, the omnipresent God. But Delraun's not going to fight it. He had no better ideas. Delraun's not necessarily terribly creative. The other people, I've sort of answered this as Jose before, but for Delraun, he respects Althea. I respect Althea a lot, just because of her power. Aoide is just a friend. I've known her forever. We disagree on a lot of things, but we're friends, so, that's what friends do. We stick together, even though we disagree on a lot of things. And Audrin's a mess. Audrin is a mess in many different ways, maybe more than people realize. He sees that, or I see that Audrin has kind of that faith in him. He has the ideals. He has the justice and the good can prevail, and that people should be good generally. And when he sees people do things that are not very nice, that are very messed up or evil, he reacts. So I think I view the team as strong, a weapon. And that's because of the training I've had. The training I've had in the monastery has been weapon-based. And not necessarily of like a sword is a weapon. I am a weapon. The body is the weapon, right? The sword is just part of you. It's just an extension. It's a tool you use. But the sword doesn't kill. The person kills, right? And that extends to the group. If you have a team that you're fighting with or that you're doing something with, now they are the weapon. We're all the weapon, and we all have our strengths and weaknesses, and different parts of us can help each other. So he sees the group, or I see the group, as strong and powerful, and as he learned in the monastery, used in the right way, any weapon can possibly kill even a bigger enemy if used in the right way. So he kind of sees it as like this strong weapon that he doesn't know how to use yet. And he's waiting for that moment to really stab at Creakin or at someone. Yeah. I'm very minimalist. So if you guys see me compared to everyone else in the table, I have my dice and my phone because I use D&D Beyond. I used to have a character sheet, and then I gave it up for the phone because I was like, I'll try this, and it worked really well. That's all I have. I don't really need any props. All the props are imaginary. It's D&D. The colors for each person, I'll tell you exactly how it happened. Jesus, I think, came in, and he said, we're going to color code your characters. And I said, I got dibs on green. And that's how that happened. And then I think Jordan said she got purple. And then Paola said she had blue. And then red was left over, and Andrew picked red. That's pretty much, there was no fighting for any colors. We all had our own colors that we already had in mind, I guess. That's how that happened. I don't think we put that much thought into the colors. I guess you could maybe at some point you could probably come up with something connected to their colors. I don't know if the other players have connections to their colors. I picked green because I like green, personally, not Delraun, just I like the color green. And in video games and stuff like that, I tend to make things that are green. So that's why I picked it. Story-wise, the green for Delraun is the color of the monastery that he went to. So the clothes that they wear at the monastery, like their uniform, I guess you would say, or their robes or whatever, are green and black. So he wears green and black because although, I guess it's part of Delraun's backstory, although he got kicked out of the monastery, the reason why he kicked out might come up in the game at some point, but he doesn't have any hard feelings against them. He still believes sort of like in Daya and what they taught him and stuff like that. So he has no hard feelings against them, so he still wears the colors, even though he's technically not part of them anymore. Well, the two things that come to my mind right now that I'm remembering a lot is the ball. When we went to the party, I thought that was funny. I think that was a turning moment for the story. I think Mark did a great job with that, DM to DM, because I also DM. I like how it went, how everything just turned. That was like a really big turning moment for a lot of characters and just the whole story in general. So I really like that section. Before that was the section when we met Sala for the first time, the princess, because when we found out sort of like this crazy thing of like she was trying to escape, so she got in contact with some people, or some people got in contact with her, and this whole crazy thing, pretty much a lot of people died, and a lot of things happened just because this kid wanted to go meet her lover or whatever, and then it didn't even work out. She got played by, people, powers above her, so she just ended up getting played. That was a big moment, I think, for both. And I don't think it came through very much in the show, but it was a big moment, I think, for Audrey and Delraun, because we're the two people who are like, what? You did what? That's dumb. You got played. And we were trying to, especially Audrey was trying to be like, what you did was insane. And like some of that blame falls on you. That was a terrible decision you made. And both our characters would say something like that. And I think that was a really good moment for Audrey because I think he turned from like joking around and being like the drunk who was playing with like wolves and stuff and just being a complete mess to being like, wait a minute, this is messed up. This is what I believe. He finally kind of put his beliefs forward, and it's like, you messed up. That's really bad. And now we have to fix this whole mess and all that stuff. And I think that was a really cool moment from Audrey. And then the moment in the ball. And then where we are in the story now, I think it's pretty cool. I like the fight, because at this point it already came out, the fight that we had in the carriages. That was really fun. That was a really good thing from Mark. That was a lot of fun as a player. Why enjoy Mark as a dungeon master? He has he's very different from other dungeon masters I've met. I feel like most dungeon masters fall kind of in like one group, And then there's those outliers that kind of do things a little bit differently. And Mark is one of the outliers. First off, he's hilarious. He has a bit of an awkward comedy, but other than that, he's just really funny. He can make voices that are pretty funny and interesting. My favorite voice being the one that I called exhausting. There was like a little gnome or something who like every time he would speak would just take the breath off of me because it's just like he was using so much air. So I came up with the like, you're just exhausting. But I think it's because I think what I like most about him is what I try and do as well as a DM myself. He's really yes and he's really improv-y, where he's not gonna shoot down an idea. If someone comes up with something ridiculous, which we have several times, he's not gonna be like, that's too much. We're doing this instead or something, or we're not doing that at all. He will just go with it. He will just be like, okay, let's figure it out. And that gives you a lot of room as a player to really come up with weird solutions and weird things when you're not limited by what's in the book or what the DM's willing to allow. And I like that because I think the real role playing and the real fun of D&D shows when there's no barriers, when there's no constraints. Because technically what you're trying to do when you're playing D&D is that I've made a character of Delraun and I'm trying to play that character as a person. So it's weird if you think about it, in your own life, living your life with barriers. Like there's things you can't do because the rules don't allow it to. It makes no sense. It's kind of hard to think of like a world like that. So being able to just be like, you know what, Delron's gonna jump from a carriage to another one. He's gonna wrap this chain around this thing and then put a spear through it and put it through the wheel. And it's like, there's no rule for that. And it does not come up in any of the books. We'll figure it out. Let's see what we roll. And Mark is willing to do that. So I like that. I like that DMs that do that allow the crazy stuff to happen and they figure it out along with you. So I make it a point to challenge Mark with random things. I like giving them some sort of challenge or throwing them off. I think is the word I used. I like throwing them off their game. Pretty much, I like forcing them to think things and improv, and I like to see how they kind of figure things out and do the critical thinking, because most of the time the critical thinking is happening on the player side, where the DM's doing more of the logical thinking. They're doing a lot of improv, but they're trying to make sense of what you're doing. So a player says something, and the dungeon master or the game master is trying to grab that and be like, how does this work with these rules and these things, these dice and all this stuff? And it's very logic-based. So I like to throw game masters off of that and be like, you know what, I'm doing this, which the book tells you nothing about, and I want you to figure it out. And that challenges them to then not only improv, but go off and be more creative about how they tackle something that the book doesn't have a rule for it, or there's just no way of figuring that out. And I like doing that because I like when I game master, I like when people do that to me. I think that's the most fun for me. Because most of the time when I'm game mastering, I'm having fun with people, but my fun depends more on how other people are having fun, right? Like someone says something funny or something does someone interesting. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. That's really cool. But then someone throws that curveball at me where I'm like, oh, snap. Let me figure this out. And those are really fun moments, because then after, it usually leads to moments that are unscripted, right? Because if you throw something at me that makes me improv, we're starting off at an improv already. So they have to improv off of that, and it just escalates really quickly. As opposed to usually a game master is doing something that starts very logical, and then the players are the ones that improv off of that. So getting thrown off like that, I think, leads to a lot of fun moments, and it's just, as a DM, it's just fun. For me, at least. I don't know if Mark likes it. Mark might hate me every time I do something like that. But I love when someone challenges me like that. It really makes me just have to come up with some stuff, some crazy stuff. And it helps me also, I think, as understanding the rules better, or understanding the game better. When you're thrown off like that and you're like, okay, throw this book out. You have to kind of go into the essence, what is D&D and what is the game? So it's like, oh, you're trying to do this crazy thing. Let's go back to the essence, dice, probability, how hard is something, and what kind of skill would you use, and let's just go with that. I think it's fun. And I try to do it to other game masters with varying degrees of success. But Mark is one that always picks it up real quick. The importance, so the improv is just a term that we put on it, like we put on different things. And I think maybe that maybe scares some people away because they're like, oh, it's this acting thing or something. It's not. We're just making stuff up. Improv, all it is being able to graph something that someone else came up with that you didn't come up with and make something out of it. Kind of just open your mind and kind of tear down whatever constraints and walls you have in there, and just being able to grab something and you're like, oh, you know what? That's crazy, or even I don't like it, or I do like it, and just making something else out of it and then passing it along. And I think that's really what makes improv and D&D shine, is it becomes a community thing. So D&D and any role-playing game, you're creating a story, but not by yourself. It's not one person writing a game. I mean, Mark goes and writes his story and his game and stuff, but the characters are really played by us. And anyone who writes or does stories or whatever will tell you that stories are very character-based. You can have a great plot, but if the characters are just not well thought out, or are not well flushed out, it's boring. The characters really make the story, because a lot of stories are repeated. I mean, there's only so many stories you can tell, really, but it's those characters in the story that really make it. So Mark, as a DM or any dungeon master, is kind of making this framework of the plot of the movie, right? And then we come in and make these characters that live in that plot and really make it shine. And it's all done by several people. It's not one person, right? I play Delraun, Andrew plays Audrin, and there's Aoide, and we're all different people, and we all have different thoughts, different sense of humor, different just everything. And we're all pretty much, Mark is grabbing this little baby story that he wrote, and he passes it over to me, and I make it grow, and then I pass it over to someone, and it just keeps growing and growing. At the end, whatever story we end up with was not Mark, was not me, it was all of us. All together made this crazy, insane story. And that's really what makes Dungeons and Dragons, and any role-playing game so special, is that we're all just kind of sitting down, and you can call it improv, you can call it whatever you want, but we're just making stuff up, and we're just kind of passing the ball to each other one at a time, and we keep adding on to it. We're just doing that yes and, which is the rule of improv or whatever. Again, it's a term that you can use, the yes and, where it's just that Mark comes up with something, and I grab it, and I one-up it, and I pass it along, and they one-up it, and they one-up it, and we just keep going and going and going. And you end up with just crazy stories that are your own, and not just your own as in like one individual, your own as in a group. So that story that happened right there, even if people are watching on TV or on YouTube or whatever, is your own. And when you go to like a party or something or whatever, and I go to somewhere and I see Andrew, and I'm like, oh, you remember that time Delraun and Audrin were flushing things down the magical toilet? And everyone around us is going to be like, what are these guys talking about? But it's our own story that we made, and we understand that. And that's really cool, and I think that's what makes Dungeons & Dragons special. Us four working together, I think I might have a different answer to most people, because I would say it's not us four, it's Dungeons & Dragons, it's the game. I feel like any group of 4 or 5 or however many people are playing can have a very interesting dynamic, even though you didn't know they could, as long as they're all willing to play the game, as long as they're not taking it seriously. There's plenty of people out there that just take the game way too seriously, but there's people out there who take any game way too seriously and just get annoyed when, Delraun jumped off a building? Why? Why would you do that? No, I don't want to play with you anymore because that's dumb. You dealt damage to yourself. Why would you do that? That's dumb. And it's like, because I'm playing the game. It's just, that's when the rule of yes and breaks, and they're playing a game and they're not being imaginative. They're not playing a role-playing game. They're just playing kind of like a board game almost. So as long as there's no player in there like that, as long as you're willing to open yourself up to like, yeah, do something stupid or do something smart. It doesn't matter because we're just going to keep the game going and have fun. Any group will work. I don't think it's just us four. And I think that's my way of telling people out there, especially people who want to try Dungeons & Dragons, but are a little bit scared because maybe it's like, oh, they see a group of 4 people like us or any other people playing online. They're like, how do you find a chemistry like that? How do you find the people to like interact with that play so well with you? And it's like, you don't. You just find anyone who's willing to play, and you will have that interaction. As long as everyone's there to have fun and is willing to really just open themselves up to ridiculousness and craziness and even emotion, then you'll find that group. You'll have their interactions. It's not like we were like super best friends before we even got in here. We're all willing to play. So I think that's how you get that. How you get involved is easy. Find someone that already plays or go online and finds it. So yesterday I did a game I did a one-shot yesterday. A one-shot, for anyone who doesn't know, is just like one-time game. It's just like a closed-off story. It's not a campaign that keeps going. It's just 1 4 or 5 hour game. But I did one yesterday for a friend of mine. He has this girlfriend that they've been dating for a few months or whatever, and she found out that he plays D&D. So he's like, oh, you want to try it? And she's like, yeah, I would love to try it. So then my friend came to me because he knows I DM a lot, and he's like, hey, would you be down to do a one-shot for her because she's the first time playing? I'm like, sure, I'll run any game for a first-time player, because that's the thing you'll find is that if you're looking to play D&D, as long as you find someone who plays it already, everyone's always willing to get new players. I mean, we want to spread the word. We want people to play this game and see what we're having so much fun with and get you to have fun with us. So go to a game store, your local game store, Google it and see if you find a game store. I'm sure they have a Dungeon Master or a Dungeons and Dragons thing or Dungeon and Dragon Night. Or find people that you play with, and they'll find people who DM and stuff. So I ran a game for her yesterday with her boyfriend and 3 other guys from people that I play with. And we had a blast, and she loved it, and now she's going to play D&D. And that's how you get into it. So, and you don't have to buy anything. It's not a commitment or anything. If you find someone that plays D&D, they have the books, so it's fine. The crew's awesome. I mean, I'm a mechanical engineer. I do 9 to 5 every Monday or Friday. I don't do an artistic job. I like to think I'm artistic or creative because I play D&D and I draw and I do other things. But I've never been in a job area or section or environment where like this is like the actual job. So I never knew how much work it is. It's a lot of work. And they come here, everything's set up. Everything's smooth. Anything problems comes up, they fix it. It's amazing. Something I wouldn't be able to do. I don't know anything about this stuff. I know how to like hit record in the camera. Maybe, I don't know. These have a lot of buttons. I will have to read through it. But it's great. And Jesus, the producer, is friends with Mark, and they're the ones who came up with the show, along I think with Andrew or something. But who cares about Andrew? They had this idea and they made it happen. And me and Jordan show up, or even Paula, and we just kind of, it's their baby and it's here and we play it and it's smooth, and I don't think we've ever had any issues. And I like the quality. I think if anything in the show is lacking, is us, not the quality of like the filming or the sound or anything like that. They're doing their job great. We have to step it up. I'll like you a lot if you subscribe and watch us. That'd be nice. I mean, watch it. If you like it, subscribe. If you like it, hit like and share it and stuff. If you like it and you are a fan of Dungeons and Dragons and you want I guess you could call it a sport or a game or whatever you want to call it, to spread, then share it. And the whole point is that the reason Dungeons and Dragons is exploding so much now and people are getting so much into it is because for the longest time we haven't had, or when it first came out, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, all that stuff. So it was very word of mouth, right? And, there was the whole scare of like people saying it was a satanic thing or whatever it was. And they were louder than the people who actually played it and knew that that wasn't the thing. But now with the internet, with YouTube and sharing it on Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat or whatever, now we're the loudest people, right? So now we can share it and be like, you know what? This is what D&D is, and it's fun, and you shouldn't be scared of it. And this idea of like, a bunch of nerds rolling dice and arguing over rules and stuff, it's like, that's been shattered. It's not that. It's never been that. I'm sure there's some people that do that. That's good for them. Go have fun in your mom's basement. But most people don't do that. I mean, we're just having fun, and it's a very open-minded game. And this kind of new age of being able to share things and the internet and stuff, I think has allowed us to be like, here is what D&D is, and we share it, and people kind of get into it and try it on their own. That's how I got into it. I saw people playing online, and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I've heard of Dungeons and Dragons. I never knew that's what it was. So then I tried it. And so if you're watching or you want to watch Vicious Mockery, share it. Share it with your friends that don't play or are thinking of playing, or share it with your parents. Who knows? Maybe your parents want to play D&D. There's a lot of people who used to play D&D or heard about it and never tried it and might want to try it now. So age groups don't matter. From kids to old adults, I'm sure a lot of people would like to try it if they knew what it was. So sharing is, I think, is the most important thing. Get the word out there so that people can see what it is, because a lot of people didn't, I think, never had the idea. They might have heard the name before, but never really known what they were talking about. Because there's still people out there, like my job, I think the first 2 or 3 days that I showed up, or like after the first week, I played D&D on the weekend and came back to work, and this girl that works there was like, oh, what'd you do on the weekend? I was like, I played D&D, and she's like, what is that? And it's like, there's still people out there who don't know what Dungeons & Dragons is. So I explained it to her, and I told her about the videos and all that stuff, and we'll see. I'm sure she'll try it eventually, and we'll see. If she likes it, cool. If she doesn't, that's cool too. But spreading the word's really what matters, so yeah, get your friends into it. It's a gateway drug. Play more D&D, man. That's it. It's fun. Or at least try it out. I would say my thing, I always try and get people to play D&D, and I'm not going to say that all of them get into it. I do run a lot of like games for people to like try it out the first time, and not everyone gets into it. And I've even had players get into it and they play for a while and then they give it up. But that's fine. I mean, just try it. I think it's a what makes it special is that it's not a board game, it's not a card game, it's not this crazy hard thing to get into. It's just you being, all you have to bring is you and your imagination and be creative, and it's a great creative outlet, and it's great just for life lessons almost. I mean, you're playing characters and people who have a chance of dying or could die or and dealing with really tough situations most of the time. So it's just a great experience all around, both emotional, fun, funny, and you still learn a lot, especially because you're playing with other people. So, and you're opening yourself up to all that creative and emotional stuff. So you kind of learn a lot about people and how to deal with things. And it's also a great mental exercise. Any logical people out there, like other engineers or scientists or something, kind of like myself, if you're looking for a great mental exercise to work out your brain, not only playing, but definitely dungeon mastering is an intense mental exercise that really helps you think on your feet, and that has helped me definitely, both in school and in work, being able to think on your feet fast. Because it doesn't matter if you're trying to figure out how Delraun takes down a carriage, or if you're trying to figure out how to do whatever in your job. It's the same. You have to kind of think in your head quickly and figure out kind of what you want to do and what things need to be done. Great mental exercise if anyone's looking for a hobby that really flexes their brain muscles. So just try it out, and if you don't like it, that's cool. If you do like it, awesome. And if you like it, but then you don't like it later, that's awesome too. You know what? Just give it a try. It's not a drug or anything. You're not going to ruin your life. It's only going to ruin your life if you really like it, and then you will have no time for anything else.